The next one that we're going to discuss is we're going to discuss about what we call this industrial revolution. Now, industrial revolution actually paved the way for a lot of things that happened from the past that eventually connected the future. The first question that might come to your mind as to what we call this industrial revolution? Why do we often hear this term industrial revolution? Now, first and foremost, when we talk about industrial revolution, this is actually the start, or this is actually an event that that from the agricultural society, there was already a great introduction to becoming an industrial one. So from agriculture towards industrialization. So meaning new methods were actually introduced, people are actually migrating. So basically, we need to remember that for industrial revolution, there is what we call an introduction of significant social, cultural, and political changes, first in the lives of the people of Europe, but basically it spread out even up until here in Asia. Effects of industrial revolution were the following. First, there was again the increase in migration. Second one, of course, since people are migrating from rural to urban areas, there's eventually what we call the growth of urban population. And of course, there's a changes in lifestyle because at this time, there already exists what we call this fast food chains. There already exists as what we call this instant foods that are being manufactured in the factories or manufactured in the different industries. And then, of course, there was a much more increase in production because, again, new technologies were already introduced, technological advancement, and of course the rise of the middle class because at this time people already learned how to make money or make a living with the different platforms or with different jobs because of the rise of the different industries. Widely believed that the factors that influenced the Industrial Revolution were mainly technological in nature. So there were inventions and technological breakthroughs that were achieved that significantly altered our economic activities, and also it paved way for massive social, cultural, and political changes in society. So as what I mentioned, agricultural societies were transformed into becoming industrial societies. Now, for the Philippine setting, we all know that most presidents, their goal was actually more into industrialization. That's why, as you can see, even on the previous administrations, they would always want to have this project such as build, 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 because it's actually a way of them transforming Philippines from an agricultural society towards a much more industrialized one, or what we call this industrialization. Now, because of industrialization, eventually there were actually changes when it comes to our economy. There were actually also changes as how our government handles our economy. Now, basically for Adam Smith, he argued that the role of the state or the government is only to facilitate the growth of the economy and maintain an unregulated free market, especially right after the industrial revolution. Now, the government should not interfere. That's the concept of Adam Smith. So whatever it is, it will just plainly or solely based on what we call the law of demand and the law of supply. So the government, whatever it is, should not interfere. Your question might be, ma'am, what will happen if we have what we call this unregulated free market? So basically, since it will just based on the law of demand and the law of supply, if there's a spike, if there's a high demand and there's actually a spike of the prices, eventually the government could not interfere. So say, for example, when face mask will be sold, especially during this pandemic, will be sold at, say, for example, 20 pesos per piece. Okay, and there's no intervention of the government because the demand is too high and the supply is just low. So basically, the supplier can just do that freely. So there will be no regulation. In connection with Adam Smith's unregulated free market, we have this term, this French term we call as laissez-faire. Now, laissez-faire means let be. So this is a principle of the non-intervention of government in economic affairs. So it is the heart of the doctrine that the economy works best when left alone by the government. So its central assumption is that unregulated market economy tends naturally towards equilibrium. So basically this laissez-faire, this concept of unregulated free market is also related to what we call this perfect competition. So again, as what I always mention when it comes to the laissez-faire principle or the unregulated free market of Adam Smith, it is greatly connected to perfect competition. Again, perfect competition is where the prices of goods and services are not dependent on government policies and are set freely based on the interaction between supply and demand. So we call it a perfect competition if we just base it on the law of supply and the law of demand without the intervention of any governing bodies.